Hello and welcome to Audible Anomaly, the podcast where we foster deep and meaningful conversation to help get you through your darkest days. I'm Josh, and in today's episode, we are talking about the best advice we have ever received. It's going to be a good one. Really excited for this one. But as you can see, I'm not alone. I have some awesome friends here with me. Let's go with Kevin. How was your week?
My week was pretty good. How about your own?
That was very short. Yeah, my week was pretty great. I don't know if I did anything really.
I am in a very similar boat.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't really do much other than work on Audible Anomaly and something for Davey.
Oh, very exciting. Speaking of Davey, how was your week?
My week is okay. Work has been chaotic to say the least. A lot of things changing, so there's been some adjustment, or at least it's going to be a lot of adjustment coming up, and so I'm kind of preparing that. I got my second vaccine shot, so that's exciting. And then I woke up today with the stiffest of fucking necks. Yeah.
How are your pillows?
Not great. I need a new mattress.
That'll probably help as well.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I can't. I've had a lot of trouble sleeping just over the last year. And a huge part of that is because of my dog.
Oh, yeah.
And last night alone, he woke me up 3 times within an hour and a half to take him out.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know. I've got to find some way to. I feel like he is asking more. And I think one is because he's an old dog and he's got a small bladder. But I know it has something to do with the way he's like trained to do it. Because for a long time before he moved into my current apartment, he was only really being taken out 2 to 3 times a day. And now he's out maybe like 10 to 15 times a day. It's wild. It's a lot, and it's really wearing on me. Especially if I can't sleep, I wake up irritable and annoyed at the world already. So I got to find a way to change that.
Yeah, that probably would be good if you're able to train him and get him on a better schedule.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's that much, though.
Seriously.
Yeah. A lot of nights, it's an average of 2 to 3 times. The highest night, I think, was like 7 or 8.
Oh, my God.
Jeez.
Yeah, I was up every hour. It was awful.
Jeez. Well, you're ready for parenthood, I guess. Yeah, just preparing you for that.
Just a little bit.
just a little bit. Well, hey, if you need some advice, I got you, okay? Speaking of advice, let's get on to today's topic, advice. We are talking all things advice here. Before we share some of our favorites, I figure we can kind of dissect and take a look a little bit into the world of advice. And I got a couple of questions for you. Let's see what you guys think. The first question I have, in your opinion, what makes a good piece of advice?
It's a very interesting question. I am not a big fan of motivational advice. A lot of those like motivational speaker stuff, or you see those little quotes on Instagram or Facebook, I am not a fan. So for me, a good piece of advice is something that can resonate with a person. Because I don't think there's a good overall piece of advice. I think advice kind of has to speak to a person very specifically. And I'll explain there's like one piece of advice or like at least 2 pieces of advice that I've always just followed. And I think for advice to be good, it has to resonate, which means there kind of has to be some kind of experience behind it. I don't know.
Yeah, I've always been in the camp of advice needs to definitely be relevant, for one. Because, I mean, you can give me the best advice in the world, but if it doesn't apply to me, what's the point? Right?
You mean you don't want to hear the best way to secure drywall right now?
You know what I need the best piece of advice to float those corners because it is a doozy, let me tell you. No, but it really is one of those where I think timing of it matters to an extent, but also just that relevancy, making sure that it actually applies to you overall is kind of the main thing. What about you, Kev?
I'm right there with you guys. Specificity to the situation is big.
Yeah.
But I do agree that advice that comes from experience is significantly better than advice that's been passed down time and again, just generally.
They say the best way to learn is to fail, right? So when I feel like the best advice comes from people who have literally done what you're trying to do and have failed, and then can literally say, well, I've already failed, so here is the advice to do it correctly, right? The platitudes and whatnot, just I feel have almost this hollowness behind it, and what's the point of listening? Because there's nothing to back those words.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Don't really have much more to say on that. So let's move on. Are there any moments in your life that you find yourself maybe wanting some advice? And on the flip side, are there any specific moments that you found yourself in where you're just like, I don't want any advice. Just leave me alone.
What do you got, Kevin? I started last one. What you got for me?
Sure. So I'm always looking for advice when I'm doing something for the first time, or if it's something I do a lot, but I'm looking to improve, which is not all the time. Sometimes I just want to get something done. It can be dirty, quick, whatever, just as long as it gets done. And then I don't want your advice. I have a way, just get it out of my hair, be done with it.
I have a very specific example for when I don't want advice, but there's a caveat to that. I don't want advice when I'm lifting. I don't want to hear this piece of advice that this guy, and there's a specific moment where I was working out a while ago before everything kicked off and it was a lot safer to do so in gyms, where there was this guy who was doing a leg press with 10 pounds on either side. Older gentleman, bit more rotund. I'm there with a coworker. We used to work with him at the time. We're lifting, doing some squats, and he just starts chiming in with like the best piece of it, like the best advice you could possibly think of. And we're just like, we kind of assess the situation, just like looking at him like, dude, really? Like, I understand you want to help us, and I appreciate that. If you're not following your own advice, though, realize I'm not really going to take it. The only time, though, and the caveat is if my form is actually falling apart, or if I'm not doing it correctly, sure, chime in. Other than that, don't want advice, man.
Let me ask a question. I want to take a quick step back.
Sure.
How are we defining advice? Because for me, if someone's chiming in because your form is incorrect, they're instructing.
That's fair, and I'll assess that. I'll accept that.
And I just want like for me, advice is always kind of this general tool to guide, but I don't think it's instructions. And that's kind of where my mind space, and obviously if you guys have different mind spaces, I just want to let you know where I'm coming from. Is like advice for me has always just been like a guiding light versus instructions on how to do things, right? I feel like when I am performing improv and someone tells me you need to yes and more, I don't think it's advice. I think it's instructions on how to do better performance. But I think advice in that case is try and think in the positive, try and think in the way of this and that and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I guess I want to know where your guys' heads are at on how you guys are defining advice and how you receive it. Because, I mean, it sounds like you're kind of taking this term of advice and kind of applying it also to small instructions and guiding ways in that regard.
I'd argue that some pieces of advice are, to an extent, slightly instructional, just because they kind of guide you. And it's one of those where, let's say I'm not squatting deep enough, to use the same analogy. It's like, hey, if you squat a little bit deeper, you'll get a bit more activation of the correct muscles, right? I'd see that more as advice rather than an instruction, because it's more of like a quick, hey, check it. Here's a little nugget for you to kind of take on and roll with it. The example of like where you're saying like yes and no, yes and right. I almost feel it's more like constructive criticism,
right?
Which, in a sense, especially if you're newer to the game, it could be advice, right?
Art is hard because it's all art is opinion based, right?
Subjective.
And so it is all constructive criticism. But like I said, it's I mean, technically, if we're doing it by the book, it's instruction versus advice. At least that's how I see it. I see, and I think with your analogy, there is advice is kind of like you can do something better, but it wasn't necessarily correcting the way you do it. It's just here's a better way. I mean, I think that's a way to see advice is like, oh, you can just do this better. Not that you're necessarily doing things wrong, but that you could do things better.
Sure. It's more of a suggestion rather than an order, you might say?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of things are suggestions versus orders, right?
Yeah, that was a bit strongly worded.
No, but I understand your point. I understand your point. And I'm just trying to help the audience and all of us just be on a page of like where we're all at. I know we start talking about these words and I'm almost like, I don't want anyone to get lost in the weeds.
For sure.
So I guess let me answer this question. Are there any moments where I find myself wanting advice or moments that I don't want any advice? I almost never want advice. I'm a big dumb head with a very big thick skull. And most of the time, the only way I learn is through failure, which is a bad way to live. And I don't advise it for anyone. But and as I've said time and time again, I'm kind of a stubborn idiot.
I may have a piece of advice for you, ironically enough.
How dare you?
You might actually line up, but we'll get to that. It's way down the road. It's one of our audience responses. But
I never seek advice. I always and I never want people to tell me advice. I just want to find little things out there that then suddenly resonate, and I will follow almost subconsciously.
That's fair. So you appreciate advice when it falls into your lap, but you're not necessarily actively seeking it out.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. I feel like most times I'm the same way. There are certain occasions, especially more recently, where I'm trying to just figure out what I want to do. Where I'm like, what do you think? I ask for opinions, right? Is that a form of advice? Would you say?
I think it depends on how it's given.
Yeah, there's a fine line between giving your opinion and giving advice on a situation.
Okay.
Depends on how it's phrased. Like, yes, do it, I don't think is an advice piece. But
I don't know, that got me through college. Wait a minute, I'm still in college. But you're right. You're right. I was just curious.
Yeah. It's an interesting line to walk.
For sure. All right. Moving on to the next one. If you had to pick one piece of advice to give someone, could be anyone in any situation, what would it be? Both person, situation, etc.
I will give one, and this piggybacks last week's episode. Find your purpose. Find your purpose. Don't let other people dictate what you need to do in life, and don't let outside forces dictate what you need to do in life. Find your purpose, as hard as it is, and find the happiness within it.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, Davey. I believe it was King Polonius from Hamlet who said, "To thine own self be true."
I don't know that quote specifically. I'm not great with quotes. I do know Hamlet well, the whole story. I don't know quotes, but that makes sense.
Yeah, to thine own self be true. Pretty much, don't forget who you are. Always remember who you are.
Yeah.
That'd be my tidbit for really anyone.
Yeah, those are both, I mean, in the same vein, but they're both really good. The piece of advice that stuck with me from my childhood was pick and choose your battles. Like, you can argue with everyone until you're blue in the face, and that's a lot of fun, but it's not always right for the situation. Like in an interview, probably not a good idea to argue. So, time and a place for everything.
Right before the podcast, perfect time.
To be fair, I consider that more of a discussion than an argument.
I wrote this down before that, and I wanted to find something different, but I couldn't.
That's too funny. That's too funny. The other one I would have is, if you ever are eating a hamburger, you can place 3 fingers. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Not gonna do that. We're not gonna go there. But all right, that's gonna wrap up the questions that I have. Any other questions you guys want to maybe throw in there I can think of before we start sharing our piece of advice?
What do you guys feel like is the best place to find advice?
I think kind of piggybacking off of one of the pieces of advice that I have, I think those that surround you, those around you.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, but I want to go a level further, is the people who surround you, who love you the most. I feel like the people that genuinely love you the most, or the people that genuinely love you, are the people you should probably take advice from, because they have your best interest at heart.
That's probably a good idea. I would have aimed more towards the people who have experienced what you are experiencing. Whether you know them well or not.
I think it's a good, that's probably a better answer than mine.
I mean, having the right intention is very helpful. You can give people awful advice.
That's true. But yeah, that's for sure. You got to know, like, they have to, like I said earlier, they have to have experienced it. They have to have failed before to then give you the advice to succeed.
Hopefully they've also succeeded eventually. It's just failures, it's very helpful. But knowing what works, also very important.
I don't know. I feel like advice can also come with, don't do this. And it's just one more piece of the puzzle to succeed.
Yep.
I mean, who knows? Maybe that guy that was on the leg press was a former bodybuilder back in the day who just tore his body up.
Could be.
Or had injury. Maybe I should have listened to that advice. Damn.
Well, there comes the time and place of, like, even if someone's super experienced in something, if you don't know them, it's kind of hard to take advice from that person.
I'd take your notion of those who love you a step further. I'd say those who love you and know you well.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only do they have the best intentions in mind, but they know who you are and what fits into your personality. At least they should. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's especially in my own experience, I feel like that's partly where I've had, to an extent, like a slight disconnect with like my mom over that, where it's like she has this perception of me, and it's not entirely wrong, and she wants obviously the best for her little baby boy, but doesn't always line up with my interest or things like that. So it's like,
Yeah.
you know, at least in some regards, I definitely just think it's those who love you, those who know you the best places to find those tidbits, especially. And I'll touch on yours a little bit later once I share one of mine, and it'll make sense why having these people that had the experience that you may be going through. I don't know, like us, maybe with life and depression and stuff. Maybe you should, listen to our advice. I don't know. Self plug within the own show.
Very important there.
Hey, we don't have ad breaks. That's the closest thing we're going to get for now.
This episode brought to you by us.
Yeah. Come back.
We're awesome.
Come back. Listen to all of us.
No, don't click off. Oh, how dare you?
Please come back.
It's not that kind of ad break. But, all right. I think that's going to wrap up our little question section.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into advice. I got way too many. I have so many that I didn't even include some of them on here.
Oh, really?
Oh, there's two of them that I've added to other ideas for the future. But it's funny because I'm the exact opposite of you, Davey, in that I am very much a quote person. But my memory kind of allows for it. And I think that's also, I love the story. Lion King was great, but in Hamlet, there's so many just beautiful quotes from Hamlet I think I stayed for the story I came for the story, stayed for the quotes, just because it's so well done.
Shakespeare was a genius. And people can keep trying to downplay him and say that it was other people who read him. But let's face it, it's all of his plays. If you've read enough of them, you realize most of the writing style is exactly the same, and everything kind of follows the same pattern. And there's probably things that we find deeper meaning in than they actually intended. But Hamlet is a beautiful play, and it should always stand the test of time.
Yeah, absolutely. With that said, advice. Who wants to go first? Who wants to share one of them? We'll go around. We'll go around the room.
I'll throw one out there. It's specifically woodworking advice, but you can lean it into other things, like measure twice, cut once. Just be sure of what you're doing.
Weigh out those pros and cons. Make sure that you're not going to cut too much and then you're SOL with your boat.
Yes.
It's a very big con.
That would be.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. How about you, Davey?
I steal this from improv, but it's simply put, yes and. I encourage everyone to look up the concept of yes and. It's very simple. Someone says something, you say yes, and then you add to that. It is great for conversation. It is great for public speaking. It is great for discussion. Don't end with a yes. Never say yes and then stop there. Continue. I'll add to what they're saying. People become more engaged in conversation, and people are more inclined to believe and engage with you and be more comfortable with you.
Yes, and you're able to build a better rapport with that person.
Yeah, just look up the concept of yes and how it implies, how you can apply it in your life. That's my advice.
That's a good one. I got mine from Netflix. At least this one. I wasn't expecting it. It was literally just, I believe it was Final Table. Amazing cooking show. But at one point, one of the chefs, it was an elimination round. The people got sent home, really talented, but they flubbed the dish. But the advice that the chef had is willpower is like water. Nothing can stop it. It flows around mountains and falls off waterfalls, but no matter what, it always gets to the place it's supposed to go. Willpower will get you wherever you're supposed to go. Find your purpose and find a way to get there. There's no one direct path to it. You'll ebb and flow, but you'll get there.
Yeah, you just gotta keep getting up, as they say in Spider-Man.
Only in Spider-Man.
Yep, just Spider-Man alone.
It's what came to mind.
What do you got next for us, Kevin?
If we're going with stolen advice, I think it was the founder of the Hilton chain of hotels. His final piece of advice was to always leave the shower curtain on the inside. Which is very simple, but man, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
See,
like, who wants a wet bathroom floor?
See, I don't have this current problem because both my showers have doors.
Mm-hmm.
But huge difference. Huge difference.
I hate when people leave the curtain out. Like, I get it's annoying when you shower, but that just the floor is all wet and it's annoying and it doesn't dry because it's in a bathroom and it's just a pain in the batukas.
Yeah, and then the next person comes in, then they step down and it's like, oh, why is my foot wet? Right next to possibly the toilet. It's like, It's a gross moment.
Yeah.
It's not a good moment.
All right, my next piece of advice is something probably everyone knows, but the golden rule. Just follow the golden rule. And if you don't know it, I'm surprised, but it goes like this. Treat others how you want to be treated. And it really just comes from the camp that I follow of just like be nice to people because you really shouldn't have a reason to be mean to people. No one should have a reason to be mean to other people, right? The reasons can be created, but when you meet someone for the first time, you really shouldn't have anything. Just treat others well. And I don't think this is a piece of advice, but I almost say whether you're religious or not, the 10 Commandments kind of follow that whole lineage of, hey, just be nice. Don't kill anyone. Don't cheat on anyone. Don't steal from anyone. Pretty easy. Pretty easy.
Yes, and love unconditionally, I feel.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. There was a very interesting moment that I had. I'm trying to remember the class. Might have been anthropology, where we're studying human psyche, right? And there was this moment this week where we had the question, is man inherently evil? Are humans like bad creatures? We see wars, we see greed, we see a lot of crazy crap, right? A lot of negativity.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a really interesting moment where they mentioned when, let's say there's a mass shooting, especially recently, it's been happening a lot, right? Let's say there's a mass shooting in New York, right? You see the headline, mass shooting in New York City, 4 people dead. What the headline doesn't say is, yeah, there's mass shooting, but also 8,999,996 people got along today. You know? And I feel like ultimately our intention, at least as a species and as a group, a collective group, I believe we are meant to love one another and enjoy each other in community. You know, it's part of the reason that we started this podcast, right? To try and build that community and build just people who just love one another, you know, who treat each other well.
man is inherently good. Their just version of good can be twisted.
Yeah. Good gets transformed into other things, and different alternative definitions get added in when inherently they shouldn't be.
Majority of the time, bad people don't think they're the bad person.
Yeah.
You live long enough to become the villain.
We're just really going through movies today.
I'm leaning in. I mean, do you not see what's behind me? All these games. Come on, you know I'm a nerd.
And my favorite piece of advice: more pictures of Spider-Man.
All right, I'll take the reins here and add a piece of advice, kind of building on the experience and this whole thing. I believe it is very important to choose your friends wisely, right? Further, and this comes from the little duo I may have name dropped in last week's episode, Rhett and Link. They say, seek out people who are going where you would like to go in life and join them. And that always stuck with me. And part of the reason why I feel like we're all kind of still friends, because we all just love the same thing. We love tech. We love one another. We're all very similar in a lot of our activities and hobbies and stuff. And I feel like we get along together pretty darn well. That's why I joined you guys.
Absolutely.
Kevin?
Okay.
Do you have any more?
Give it to me, Kevin.
Yes.
Change my life.
My advice is to listen, not to react, but to understand. Like if someone is telling you something, you don't need to think, okay, what's the best response to this, or how can I help them? Just try to gain an understanding in the moment.
That's a good one. That's a great one. I think, and one of the things that sticks out in my mind is when you see like a homeless person, right? Your first reaction is either to ignore them, or, oh, I don't really have money on me, or I have some money, let me give them some money. But it's like, is that inherently the problem? Like, is that, sure, it's a byproduct of their situation, but I don't think that's the root cause of it. So by listening and trying to understand what the problem is, you're able to better assess situations like that, where you're like, oh, let's find out the underpinnings and let's find the root cause of things. I like that one. I like that one a lot.
Can I add a little
my public speaking class?
Can I add a little variant to that, like a different understanding of that advice?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think listening to understand is what a lot of people want, and is why a lot of the times people want to just vent. So sometimes just listen to understand what they're saying, but they don't necessarily want advice or instruction. They just want you to listen. So listen, understand where they're coming from, and like, they're there. I feel like that falls in line of like, just sometimes people want people to listen and for them to understand their woes.
Sometimes they don't even want you to understand, but they just want you to hear. They need to just get it off their chest, to tell someone. I find myself in that situation a lot at times. But it's a good one. All right, Davey.
My next piece of advice, and it's really kind of just my last one. I don't have a lot of pieces of advice. Other than don't do what I do. It's simple as this, and it's a little more pointed. If you want people to like you, get them to talk about themselves. People just want other people to hear about them. People want to talk about themselves. Just, shut up and yes. Oh, and let them talk, because it'll be the best conversation they ever had. You'd be surprised, like if you're trying to make new friends, or you find yourself struggling to really connect with people, if you just stop and ask them questions, not like yes or no questions, but like open-ended questions, and let them talk, they're generally more likely to like you.
It
Also,
kinda
say their name a lot. People like when their name is said.
That's right, Davey. Yes, and just applying all of them right now. No, but I believe there was. Yeah, it was in my data analytics certificate thing that I'm going through where they tell you to ask the question why like 5 times. Because after the 5th one, you're probably gonna have a good idea of like the underpinnings or the root cause of something, right? And I kind of feel like it falls a little bit in line of that, where it's like, oh, you like that? Tell me more about it, or explain. Where you're able to just kind of open them up with these questions, and they're like, oh yeah, they'll more than likely share. I mean, sure, some people are more of a closed book, but for the most part, a lot of people just enjoy talking or conversing about themselves or things that they've done, especially like it's funny because for me, I had a moment recently where you always hear that notion of like whenever someone has a kid, like they talk about is their kid. And I kind of felt like I had that moment when we did the wedding where I'm just like, do you realize all the crap we had to go through just to get that thing off without a hitch? And it just becomes like your project, your little baby. That's like all you want to talk about, just because it's like, dude, it's insane. So I totally get that notion of just open up to, or ask questions to open up, because that's true, man.
Yeah, it's you'd be surprised. People are more interested in themselves than anything else, whether they actually think that or not. We are all the main characters of our own story, right? And so if you get to sit there and talk about your story, you generally are having a better time, and it's a topic that you know. So,
right,
and you just have to sit there and listen. Go, cool.
Let's just hope they're the protagonist in their story, not the antagonist.
Whether or not they're the main character.
True. All right, I got one, and this one actually comes from me, although I have been seeing it a lot more recently, which makes me happy. The notion that you can't control the actions of others, however, you can control your reaction towards them. This falls in this notion of like, look, people are gonna be people. People don't always abide by love everyone or treat, people how you want to be treated. Sure, people can be jerks. It sucks. How can we react differently and not fall in line with that? Right? How do we stay true to ourselves while, looking at and not reacting to exactly what they're doing? Right? Like, I feel like that's been one of those that I've always come back to, especially growing up and going through some of the rougher patches in life, where you end up, people start doing certain things, and especially as you go through schooling and stuff where people end up changing. It's gonna happen, right? Especially,
yes, and I get that, but why?
Well, it's this notion of, especially in high school, puberty hits like a brick. Some people, random aside, puberty, did it really hit you guys hard? I don't feel like it did for me. I felt like there were other factors other than maybe the hormones and wanting to be loved that kind of like really seeped in, but other than that,
it's hard for me to. I want to say yes, but I also had huge major life events happen in the midst of my puberty that changed who I was, and I think that has more to do with the life events than puberty itself. But I don't know. It's something, when we get there, I'll talk about it. But yeah, I just had a lot of stuff that happened that really changed me. So it's all happened then.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you on that one, honestly. Where it's like, stuff hit the fan.
Yeah.
I did not have that experience. But my childhood was really stable. So there's just not a lot there. It's all gradual changes.
Judging by your mom and dad, who are amazing people, might I add.
Yeah.
Like, I almost wanted to ask them at one point to adopt me.
You wouldn't be the first, or second, or third, or fourth.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. But I love my mom.
Your mom is a wonderful person too. Even if you don't always understand where she's coming from with her advice.
Yeah. We're different people from different times.
Love unconditionally.
Bingo. Bingo. Family is who you make it.
Mm.
All right. Anyone else got any others?
Can I
That's all
do
I have
advice
to
that I hate?
Sure. But do you want me to at least throw one that I enjoy first?
Sure.
Okay. Because I got one more.
Or do we want to end on a good note?
No, that's what other people's advice is for.
Okay.
All right. So the one that I had was take more risks. Not ones that'll leave you homeless, but the ones you can afford. I feel like that kind of falls in line of you, Davey, where it's like, I want to learn by failing. Right? And like we learn more from failure than we do from success. And I feel like it's along those lines of like, let's just try it. Let's see what happens. And let's see what we can learn from it.
I don't know how I feel about that piece of advice, because I feel like there's plenty of times in my life that I should have taken the risk that could have left me homeless, and I would have been a lot happier in the end. And I regret not making those choices.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, if we would have seen the foresight of GME, GameStop exploding, maybe would have invested all my money into GameStop.
Well, I mean, like when I was young and when I was like really young, taking the opportunity to really pursue acting, I regret not doing that.
Well, maybe that was the one you could afford.
The reason I started the job that we all had together was because I couldn't afford it. And it honestly, the best thing to come out of that job was the two of you and a couple other people. Like the people there is the best thing to come out of that job. But I do regret not taking the chance.
Yeah, hindsight's 20/20.
Hindsight's 20/20.
And if you haven't listened to the 2020 episode,
but I like your interpretation of try and fail, of like just take the risk, just take the chance.
Yeah.
Just see what'll happen. And if you fail, you fail, try again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like this in that there is that little bit of warning saying, like, make sure this isn't something that you cannot recover from. Not necessarily like you'll be homeless for a little while, but like, don't just hop on an airplane and try to fly. That could be dangerous.
They wouldn't even let you in because I think it's bulletproof now, the cockpit,
Well, I mean, smaller planes.
Oh, okay.
I'd hope you wouldn't start with like a
747.
Like just hijacking the plane.
That might not be a great time to start, but
Yeah.
You get a
First
lot
time
of
for
advice
everything.
pretty quickly.
Let me give you a piece of advice that I absolutely hate.
Go for it.
And I love this movie to death. Great series, but I hate the piece of advice and the quote, "Do or do not, there is no try."
No.
Because there is. Yes, in the literal sense, there is a do or do not, right? If you try and fail, then you did not. But I feel like it's taking all the power away from people trying things, because we live in a reality where you can try anything all you want, but you just there's a possibility that you never ever succeed.
I think where they're coming from is this notion of like, if you do try something, you're doing it.
Right. But that's not how it's interpreted these days.
That's how I interpret it.
I know. I just think
I've always taken more literal in that sense.
I don't like the common interpretation of like do or do not. There is no try. You either do it or you don't. So go do it. I think it's used a lot in like abusive management, for lack of better terms, where a lot of corporate upper management is forcing you to do something beyond your will and beyond your exertion because they want the results, but they don't want to work towards it in a constructive and meaningful way. I don't like it. I feel like it should be reworded. You know, it should be you either do or you don't. That's simply put, you do or you don't, right? You either do put the effort in or you don't put the effort in.
Yeah, that's sort of how I interpreted it. Like, just as a rebuttal to someone saying I'm trying, just as an excuse.
Like, yeah, but they're not actually trying. There's a difference.
Yes.
There's a difference, you know? If you're actually trying, you can't say do or do not, there is no try. You are. You are. You're trying to do it. You're in the midst of doing it.
There's also a place where there is a try, and I believe it's rugby, where you literally have to try, which is their equivalent of a touchdown.
There are trials. When you go to court.
That's a little different.
A triathlon.
You either do or do not do.
There is no triathlons. Do or do not, there are no tricycles.
Well, I hate to break it to you.
There's bicycles with an extra wheel.
Just a tricycle. Bi means 2, try means 3.
Nope, no tricycles. They don't exist. Yoda said so.
Okay. If you claim. If you claim. All right. Cool. Do you have any more that you hate, or was that just the one?
That's the one I hate the most.
That's the one. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I totally see that. And I respect it.
Thank you.
And you know who also respect? All of our audience members, especially the ones that reply.
Gold star for everyone who replies.
Gold star. We have a couple different people who reply to this one. I'm actually excited.
Woo!
So we have 5 pieces here. A couple of questions toward the end. Really interested to see your take on a couple of those. But we'll start off with one of my favorite ones, and I'll add in a little bit after this. Aspiring Fate hits us with never argue with an idiot. And to that, I will add, never stoop to someone's level because they'll only beat you with experience. It's one of my favorites. We have one that might resonate to you, Davey, from my pal Ernie. There's 2 notions of this one. It's fail early, fail often, or fail fast, fail often. These come from the notion of, I like the second version a little bit better, only because I feel like fail early, fail often. Almost like I understand they are technically different, but I feel like they're in the explanation of it. They end up falling closer a lot to each other. Fail fast, fail often. First part of failing fast is if you're going to fail, don't try and prolong it. Don't try to make it work. If you're failing, just end your misery. Take a step back. Learn what you're going to learn from it. Move on. Failing often is naturally the notion of fail repeatedly. Find what's not working to find what works, right? And it's in this notion of like, you don't necessarily want to take a company, let's say, if you're in management, to bankruptcy, but you want to try and find your niche to find your footing, and sometimes that maybe take a couple different iterations to get it right, because very few people get it right on the first try. Considering Ernie is an engineer, I'd hope a lot of his things don't necessarily fail a couple times, but as we've at least in their iterations, you don't really want a bridge to be like, well, that's the 5th time it's collapsed this week.
Yeah, you do testing, and they're, you know, like he says, fail early, fail often. That's really common.
Yeah.
Just get that out of the way, learn your lesson, and move on.
Yeah. We got one from Lost Wheat. Shout out. Don't compare yourself to others. The path you are on is only meant for you.
Hmm.
I like that one a lot, especially when we're looking at last week's little tidbit of the triangle of, seeing where you fall in respect to what others see you as and stuff like that. It's like, especially with the state of social media as it is currently, it's very easy to like look at others and compare. Well, they're off in Europe doing this trip or whatever, where you're just like, yeah, I haven't really ever been to Europe, So it's like one of those where you can easily fall in that trap of comparing yourself to others, but realize that the path you are on is only meant for you.
Yeah.
It's good.
I like that one a lot. We have one from our buddy Kelly. Do what makes you happy. You don't need to please everyone because that just causes unnecessary frustration and misery. Just find your purpose. Do it.
I like that. I like that piece of advice from her because I feel like I experienced her learning that on her own.
Yeah.
In the time that I knew her, she kind of did this evolution of kind of finding that piece of advice within herself to then be able to give it to the world. And so I'd like, just, hey, Kelly, I'm proud of you.
Absolutely.
We're all proud of you, Kelly.
Yeah. I don't know. Great advice. And it comes down to the whole idea of like, you'll learn from experience. And then when you receive that advice, it should come from someone who has lived that.
Right. Yeah. I think she did mention a bit of her story as well in some of the earlier episodes of learning that advice.
Yeah, there's definitely been I don't know the word. She has shown us that she is currently growing and has been growing for some time.
Yeah.
For sure. We're proud of you. She also offers a question. And this question is, what main piece of advice would you give to your future kids / maybe some youths?
The youth. I mean, I feel like I said mine already. Find your purpose. Find it as early as you can and pursue it for the rest of your life. But don't worry about like how long it's going to take because you've got a lot of time. I feel like a lot of people our age have this worry. Oh, we're getting to the end of our 20s. Like, I haven't done all these things. I don't have kids or a wife or a family or a career or blah, 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 blah. But you've still got time. Time is on your side. Obviously anything can happen in any time, in any day. But on average, you have time. So just take it. Find your purpose. Work towards it, however long it takes.
Yes, and I think that falls from us comparing ourselves to others.
It does.
Because we have that social pressure of like, I need to have my stuff together by 25 and know exactly who I'm going to marry and plan out the rest of my, like, I don't know, 60 years I've left on this earth. Like,
yeah, it comes from the past too, because we look at our parents and our grandparents, and they were married by 20, had a house by 22, and had kids by 19. But now we're looking at today's average, and most people aren't leaving the house until their parents' house until late 20s, and as much as people want to say that's not okay, we need to live by the standards set 50 years ago. It is okay. Do what you need to get where you're going, as long as you're trying.
It doesn't help that 50 years ago, people were being shipped off to Vietnam on the draft. So they're kind of forced out of their home to begin with, become adults in the battlefield. So it's like, different strokes for different folks, You know
what the worst thing is? I was trying to reference the 50s. My mind's still stuck in the early. Do you guys have the same problem? My mind is always perpetually stuck in the early 2000s, and I completely forget. I'm 21 years past 2000. People born in the year 2000 can legally drink.
My sister can drink next year.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
My sister learned about 9/11 as history.
Yeah,
that's mind-blowing to me.
Quite as bad about that as you are, Davey. But it's like, I constantly think it's late 2010s.
Yeah.
Oh, I constantly have, me and the wifey, we constantly have that like existential crisis of like, oh yeah, remember, oh yeah, this is a good song. Oh, what, wait, it's playing on K-Earth? Oh crap.
Yeah.
Like
now, I was just saying, I still perceive myself as young. I'm still a young little chat boy. It's just weird to think that my mind is still stuck in 2000.
Yeah, I've always been the notion of, you're getting old once the music on K-Earth gets good. It's a weird metric to go by, but the 80s rock, man, let's be real.
It's good. What are you talking about?
It's just good.
That's always been good.
Yeah. I just get to hear it more often now.
I saw a video earlier where someone said, I don't know whether this is true or not, but I think it's a funny concept that kids today are referring to the 90s as the late 1900s.
Which I mean, feel about that.
It's true. I like the idea that I was born within the late 1900s. I can tell my children that I was born in the late 1900s. Back in my day.
Considering my great-grandparents were born, I think, in like the late 1800s.
Same.
Which isn't like a far-fetched thing. It's just generations, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that. Oh, man.
If you felt old before, there you go.
So, Kevin, I don't think you've chimed in on the piece of advice. If you want to throw something in,
I gave all my good advice earlier. Just refer back to that.
Measure twice, cut once.
Measure twice, cut once. Yeah.
Yep. Especially when you're referring to hair.
What? It could get bad, but you know, there are short hairstyles too.
You swerve with what you're given, you know. Fail fast, fail often.
Exactly.
Failed on that cut. Failed on that cut.
My niece recently learned that the fail on the haircut.
Oh no.
Yeah, she just recently cut her own hair.
Oof.
And so now she's got like really, really short hair because they had to attempt to like fix it.
Yeah.
And so now it's like super, super short.
Oof.
Yeah. It's so funny. Fortunately, she's only like 4 years old. So
no one really cares. Yeah. All right. That's hilarious. We have our last piece of advice here from the photographer. And I had to reword this one a little bit. But be wary of who you get involved with romantically. When in doubt, reference the hot/crazy scale from How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, I mean, really, the interpretation of that is don't involve yourself with people that are likely to blow up. Find the red flags.
I think I have a game of red flags back there somewhere. If you need some practice. He does have a piece of advice along the same lines. What advice would you give to a young couple looking to live together for the first time? Now, I feel like I'm the only person who is actually qualified, potentially, to answer this, considering I am the only married one. But I thought it'd be interesting to see what your guys' takes were.
Learn to love their... what's the word?
Flaws?
Yeah, learn to love their flaws. Because when you live with somebody, you learn their flaws real fast.
Yes, you do. I would take a different approach, which is to have arguments more often, but keep them small. instead of letting everything pile up and become one big argument.
Can we
Don't
change
bottle it
argument to discussion?
Hmm?
Can we change the word argument to discussion?
I think discussion has a more positive connotation that I'm looking for, but it could definitely be less strongly worded than argument.
Yeah, I feel like when you say argument, it's just people looking to fight.
Mm.
And I feel like you shouldn't be fighting with someone. You should express your concerns and talk about it.
Always try to keep it productive. As soon as it starts becoming destructive, that might be the line to draw it.
Share
like
your
that.
criticism, perhaps.
There you go.
I like that.
There you go. Yeah, I always had this piece of advice from my grandma, who always said, look, if you're looking to marry someone, first thing you should do, live with them for a year. You'll get to know them day in, day out. You'll learn their habits. You'll learn their flaws. You'll learn every little bit about them. And if you still at that point love that person, hey, maybe it's the right person. You know, if you're able to not be at each other's throat and fighting all the time, right? That's a good thing. But yeah, I'm a heavy proponent of, and this is going to sound terrible, and I'm sorry, wifey, you don't truly love someone until you hate something about them. Maybe hate's a strong word, but it's similar to like finding those flaws, just because I feel like at that moment, once you start identifying those flaws or like those little things that like maybe irk you, that's the moment the love goggles kind of come off. And it's not just this honeymoon phase anymore. You're starting to see that person for who they are, right?
Mhm.
And then that thing that maybe she did with her hair, not an actual thing. I'm just hypothetically here, just because I don't want to sleep on the couch tonight or when this comes out. That little thing she did with her hair, maybe at first, oh, it's pretty cute. And then after a year of that, you're like, dude, she's doing it again. What the hell? You know?
Yeah.
So it's just one of those where you really learn about the person. And hey, we got married, which means I love everything about you. Trying to save face a little bit, but also not long.
I mean, you accept the person for who they are as a
yeah.
whole. And I think it's important in Kevin's piece of advice of like, yeah, you need to talk about it. Like if there's something that bothers you, talk about it, you know, and have that conversation and give the constructive criticism and feedback. But there's that problem of the honeymoon phase is you look at someone with 2 dimensions and then suddenly you live with them and they're these 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional people who have quirks about them that you might find don't match with yours.
You're playing 2D tic-tac-toe and they're playing 3D chess.
Yeah, and I'm playing 44 square. So
1D for each square.
Yep.
I don't even want to know what that looks like. I see the wheels turning, Kevin.
I sort of have it, I think.
Don't think too hard.
It's complicated.
Well, you know what? I'll save you from that, and we'll wrap this up here. But if you enjoyed hearing our reactions to the responses, you can get in on the conversation as well. Find us on all those socials at Audible Anomaly on Twitter and Insta. And if maybe you don't want to share some of your public stuff and maybe have or want to be a bit more discreet about it, reach out to us at audibleanomaly@gmail.com. We love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
We do this every week. And before we wrap up, I want to ask you, gentlemen, any plugs, anything you want to promote? What are you working on?
Yeah. Come find me on Twitch. I stream on Twitch 4 days a week. So twitch.tv/DPRL Tron, TRON, DPRL Tron. I also do another podcast that Josh produces called Strictly for the Bit. It is very much more of a comedy-based podcast that I do with my buddy James. It is a hoot and a half. And I promise it's very, very fun. So go listen to it. A little less family friendly, so it's just a fair warning. But a very, very fun podcast nonetheless.
Absolutely. You can find me at Bromium404 on YouTube and Bromium wherever you get your social medias. and links are in the description. And Kevin,
You can't
stop
find
following
me.
him.
Just trust me, I've tried.
You should just ask to have his address.
It's the thrill of the hunt, man.
Mhm.
It's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
Exactly.
All right. Before we wrap up, I just want to shout out to you and give you what we're doing next week. Go, you boys get ready, because we're sharing some embarrassing stories. And I have 2 bangers lined up.
I got some doozies too.
Oh man, there's not a lot of people that know about these, and I'm really excited to share them. Because they're, oh man, that was an idiot. That's the teaser. But until then, we hope you are all safe and, doing well. We enjoy hearing from you, so we'll talk at you next week. Until then, bye.